Hello, I'm Ray Mofield, and this is the Oral History Broadcast. Today, our guest is one of the more noted Marshall Countyans and Kentuckians, Marvin Prince. Now, Marvin attained a good many things in life. I don't know if he expected to go as high as he did or not. When I first knew him around Hardin, really, Marvin, I'm going to ask you. I know I didn't see PhDs, lawyers, physicians, Nat Miller Pace as a Marine Corps general. I didn't see that around there. Did you expect anything like that?
Well, you couldn't visualize it because we had such a difficult time. You know, the Depression spawned a lot of difficulty. I suppose all of us were not too optimistic, although a person who lived through it had to be an optimist, didn't he? Of course, you know, an optimist is one who will buy billfold on credit.
Yeah.
And there were a lot of good people came out of the Depression. And I think the Depression was probably the principal ingredient that caused their rise.
Mm-hmm.
Because they just got so tired of having nothing. Don't you think it had something to do with it?
I guess that's so.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you know, I've been interested in the Hardin alumni for quite a while and served as the president of that group. And one year, it was either 35 or 36, and I found a picture that I got the Tribune to run, and it was Hardin's debate team with Marvin Prince,
Ed
Kello, Junior Starks, and a Brown girl.
Yes.
And there you were with Miss Jones, the coach.
Gladys Jones.
Yeah. The funny part was that when the Tribune edited the thing, they said that Ray Mofield was the coach.
Well, you were younger than all of us. Yeah, you didn't come along for 2 years, actually.
Well, I was in the 8th grade that year, I think.
Yes.
Anyway, I was flattered to be called the coach of that team. Now, were you born around Hardin?
No, I was born in South Hillo, Tennessee, in 1919. And my dad was a Methodist preacher. Of course, you know, Methodist preachers moved about every time conference met.
Oh, yes.
No, at that time, no Methodist preacher stayed in one location longer than 4 years.
Mm-hmm.
Probably a pretty good rule. And as a result, you moved quite frequently. And I was born in South Hillo, but moved to Kentucky over around Water Valley, around 2 years later.
Mm-hmm.
I was about 2 years old. So I've been in Kentucky since I was 2 years old.
Well, now, where did you first start school?
I first started school at Blair Schoolhouse, which is a little one-room school. It's no longer there. Little one-room school over in Hickman County.
Hickman County?
Yes, sir.
But you were in the Purchase, though.
It's about a mile west of the Graves County line, the line that runs from Water Valley toward Fulgeville.
Well, you're close to Casey Jones country over
Getting
there.
a little bit east of Casey Jones,
Yeah.
a little east of it, yes. I know this territory.
Now, tell us how you got to Marshall County.
Well, my dad, being a Methodist preacher and moving around so much, got acquainted with an awful lot of people. And among other places that he preached was at Hardin in this county.
Mm-hmm.
And Aurora,
Yeah.
Union Ridge, you know.
There was a circuit there, probably.
That's true. Union Ridge was one of the churches. He's buried at Union Ridge. But when Father died, a man who knew him, Walter Prince, a lawyer here in Marshall County, a very a devout Methodist, knew my father. And there were five of us children, we children, I should say. And when Father died, Mr. Prince kind of took me over, and I had been out of school for 3 years, and he kicked me in the seat of the pants and said, get back in school. And as a result, I finished high school when I was 20 years old.
Now, wasn't that wonderful, though, that he did that?
I've thought of it many times, had he not done that. Oh, I don't know what I'd have done, really. Without an education, you were talking about the 30s, without an education, you did nothing. You know, I mean, an education is needed now, but it was needed much worse then.
Well, the only thing you could do was just rough labor jobs, farm work.
Right, I've got plenty of that. I've got plenty of it.
I did that as I was
Yeah,
growing up,
yeah.
of course, and nearly all of us did then.
Right.
But as you say, as far as moving into a profession, you never could have done it
No way.
without
No way.
that basis.
Mhm.
Well, you eventually then started, did you start high school at Hardin?
I started high school. I was freshman at Hardin.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the only year that I went to school at Hardin, was the freshman year. That year you saw the picture was the only one I went to school there.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I've been in and out of Hardin a lot, but not in school there.
Mm-hmm.
Then I went back to Water Valley and went to school for a while, and then came to Benton and finished at Benton.
You were graduated at Benton then.
Right, in 39. Mm-hmm.
So you knew my friend Ray Watkins, I guess.
Oh, sure.
He
Ray was a couple of years behind me. A year behind me, yeah.
Uh-huh. Okay.
Ray and I were good friends. We still are.
Now, when I first knew you real well, I admired you greatly because you had a 1931 Chevrolet, and it was, I thought, about the sportiest thing in this county. You had done a number of things to it. Among others, you could blow the horn with a foot pedal.
Yeah, many people wondered what was happening when the horn was blown without anyone's hands touching anything.
Yeah.
That was quite a car. What'd you say is a 31? I believe that's right,
Yeah.
31 Chevrolet. And would you believe one night we were studying for a test, some of us were, and I think the test was to be 2 days later, but we were studying over at Murray for a test, and I guess it was a year after you were talking about riding with me. And a bunch of us got to talking and decided to go to Nashville, which was more than 100 miles away, to go to Nashville for breakfast. Can you imagine doing that?
Crazy.
Of course, you got breakfast by quarter, you know.
Yeah. I remember those days when you could buy, but I didn't have the quarter.
Well, I didn't either. I guess somebody else in the crowd had it.
Yeah.
First a gasoline and breakfast, I guess.
Yeah. Well, what do you remember about your high school days and something about the town of Benton? How has it changed since then?
Oh, it's basically the same. The plan's the same, but of course the town is quite different.
Did you debate in high school at Benton?
Yes, I debated in high
I
school.
believe Hatler Morgan was the coach along about then, wasn't he?
In 1938, he was the coach of the debate team here in Benton, and Milton Hawkins and I debated together. You remember Milton Hawkins later operated a
jewelry
store in
Yes,
Benton.
I remember him well.
He married a Hill girl, and she still lives in Benton,
And
Virginia.
he expanded and had a big store in Paducah.
That's true. That's true. He and I were both on the same team, and Milton's daddy had a Lafayette automobile.
Oh, I remember those.
Yes, well, now it was quite a luxury to ride
This
in.
fella Parker over at Murray, now the Ford dealer, sold Lafayette. I remember that.
All right, we rode in that car to DeCoin, Illinois, which at that time we thought was some distance away.
Oh, it was.
And we went to a debate tournament, in an invitational. I believe that there were 64 teams invited from all over the United States.
Mm-hmm.
It was called a National Invitational.
Mm-hmm.
And Mr. Hatler Morgan was our coach. And we finished second in that tournament.
Oh, great. Well, Hatler, I think Hatler was lucky enough or smart enough one year that Benton won the state championship.
1926.
Mm-hmm.
And now then, there's a woman here in town who was a member of that team. Mary Malin. Used to work for Peel and Holland.
Oh, she worked, yeah, and lives on the highway just north of town, out about where Corinne Whitehead lives.
Used to, but she now lives in town, right across the street from the Bank of Marshall County.
Oh, I see.
In the little house, right across the street.
She's moved then.
And she is very, very sharp. You should talk with her sometime.
Mm-hmm.
Has more knowledge about Marshall County than do you know who her debating partner was?
No.
Was Carnes' boy, who is Albert Carnes, who's a lawyer in Paducah.
What? I know Albert. I always thought he was from Calvert City.
Yeah, he debated in Benton.
Yeah.
I think I'm right on that,
Yeah.
that she and Albert Carnes debated together. I believe I'm right. She would know.
Well, Benton's had some wonderful teams.
They won the state tournament in 1926, I guess it was.
Mm-hmm. Well, you were then debating for him, and who were some of the other debaters?
I guess Rayburn Watkins was. He was a year or two behind us, but I think he was on the team.
Mm-hmm.
I was trying to
Now,
think.
his partner in 40 was Eugene Rudd. I don't know what
I
he
believe
started.
that's who it was, Eugene Rudd. I was thinking that's correct. And mine was Milton Hawkins. Milton was a senior. He was the only senior in the squad.
I can remember one time when I believe Benton had this fellow. I know he debated at Murray State and seemed like he was a pastor of a Baptist church.
Jones.
Dewey
Jones.
Dewey Jones.
Jones, sure.
Now, he was quite a speaker.
Oh, he was a beautiful speaker. He is a remarkable man, young fellow too.
Mm-hmm.
When he was pastor of the Baptist church here, he was pastor of the Baptist church. It's the Baptist church that's down near what is now the Bank of Benton, right across from the Bank of Benton.
10th Street along.
Is it about 10th
Yeah.
Street Baptist Church? Yes. At that time, it was a frame church.
Mm-hmm.
When he was pastor, it's now brick, of course.
Yeah. Well, what were you thinking about when we were together at Murray? And of course, I was trying to debate for Dr. LaFollette and work on the newspaper and took all the speech courses I could because I wanted to get in radio.
Uh-huh.
Well, I finally did.
Uh-huh.
Now, were you thinking about law then?
Yes, I had from early infancy, I guess, thought of law.
Mm-hmm.
Just when I learned to talk, I wanted to be a lawyer.
Yeah.
My dad was a preacher, as I said, and I wanted to be a lawyer for some reason. I enjoyed it too.
Now, you didn't marry before World War II, did you?
No, I married after the war. I didn't marry until 1948.
Now, okay, but you did have to go in service, like all of us did, I guess, and that could walk.
Went into service. Tell you an interesting thing that happened to me in service. This was Marshall County boy too. I was in an evacuation hospital. I'd been evacuated off the front, and I was laying in a bed in a hospital, and I heard somebody fumbling around down below me, down on the ground. They didn't have a floor in an evacuation hospital. It was just a tents thrown up on the ground, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And this fellow down here on the ground was on a stretcher, and he was doing a parody of Dan McGrew. And he was saying,
shooting of Dan McGrew.
That's right. He said, and there on the floor, in the blood and the gore, lay Danger Sergeant Dew.
Yeah.
Did you ever hear of James Dew, played basketball for Calvert City?
Yeah.
Well, that's who it was. I looked down, I said, is that you, Dew? He said, hey, Prince. We started a conversation right there at the evac hospital in Africa.
Well, I started to say, was it Africa, Europe, or
It was
Asia?
Africa. It hadn't even started the European war yet.
Yeah.
They hadn't gotten around to it.
Well,
the Americans hadn't.
we had some pictures made over in there, Casablanca,
Been to Costa.
the African campaign.
Yeah.
You're trying to stop Field Marshal Rommel
Yeah,
in those
yes,
days, with the British Eighth Army under
He's-
Montgomery.
He was a brilliant general. Very brilliant.
Oh, he was.
Yes.
If he'd had unlimited supplies,
He'd killed us if he'd had unlimited supply.
it'd have been,
He was excellent. He was
it'd
very
have
good.
been different.
We were under the command of the British. We didn't have enough American troops in there at that time to have we had the 1st Division. I don't know, maybe the 36th Division a little later. But that's about all we had at that time, the American troops.
You know, I was surprised after the war, I don't think I knew it before, that to read that he had come to Gettysburg and spent a summer studying Lee's tactics there.
Rommel.
Yeah, Rommel did.
Uh-huh.
And he, in fact, they have this big electric board there that shows the strategy of the battle at Gettysburg, which is quite interesting. And he decided then that he would, you know, he said instead of cavalry under Jeb Stuart, who kind of let Lee down a little bit in a way, why, he said, we'll have tanks.
Right.
And we'll do it faster. We'll do the blitzkrieg, lightning strikes, and so on. And he plotted that whole thing from this Civil War strategy.
Well, he not only was a good offensive general, he used one of the better defensive tactics. One of his defensive tactics might be more than a tactic. What's the next step up? It's more than a tactic anyway. He would, while retreating, he would have the right and left flank to hold and the middle to retreat and trap you. You'd come in to try to overrun this middle group that was running. They'd suddenly stop, and the flanks would close in on you, and he'd trap you just like a fly. It was called the. I think he called it the spider and the fly. I believe is what he called it. You entice the person into your trap, you know.
Yeah. Now, where all did you go during World War II? Did you ever get out of Africa?
No, I was in England and in Europe. I was in southern Europe, Italy, Sicily and Italy, largely.
Oh, that is what Churchill called the soft underbelly.
That's
it
true.
wasn't very soft, though, was it?
Well, in many respects it was. Of course, we see after in the later stages of the war, 43 on, we got to where we had a good bit of ammunition. We had some good troops.
Mm-hmm.
There in the early stages of the war, we were losing badly.
Oh, they went across Sicily and Salerno.
Sure.
And then they had to kind of climb up that Italian mountain range through there.
That's true. You went into the boot there across it
and of
into
course,
Messina Straits.
eventually all of it all meshed together, and we had VE Day in Europe. I believe it was May 8th, 1945. I imagine you were glad to see that.
We were talking about Milton Hawkins.
Yeah.
A while ago. His wife was a Hill, and I was on Rue Michelet in Algiers in North Africa, walking along, and bumped into a boy by the name of Buell Hill, who was her brother.
Well,
That was a Marshall County boy right there.
What a small world.
It is small, isn't it? That's in Africa.
Yeah.
1942, I guess.
All right, you finally came back, and where did you go to law school?
Went to the University of Kentucky.
Mm-hmm.
Enjoyed it very much. Kentucky's got a good law school.
And if you're going to practice in Kentucky, I suppose that's somewhat of an advantage, is it not?
It is. Oddly enough, I was accepted at Yale and went up to try to find a place to live, and I couldn't find a place within 2 miles of the school. If you know where the school is, it's right downtown.
In the middle
The town
of
is right
New
around.
Haven.
That's
yeah,
right.
I've
That's right.
been there. It's,
And I couldn't find any place to live close to school, and I just couldn't imagine going that far to get to school.
yeah.
So I came to Kentucky.
You know,
I've always been glad I did.
A lot of these old boys after the war, they just picked out the name that always thrilled them and went somewhere like that. I know James Overby up at Murray. You know James.
Sure. Yeah.
He debated for
Another
Murray
good
State.
debater. Yeah.
And he graduated from Columbia University. But I guess he was so little he just crawled up in a corner somewhere. And
James Overby was taking a speech course with Dr. LaFollette. Do you remember Dr. LaFollette?
Oh, he made me.
All right. He was taking a speech course under Dr. LaFollette, and the course was impromptu speaking.
Mm-hmm.
And each member of the class would bring in a subject written on a slip of paper and just lay it on the table, bottom up, and upside down. And when you came in and your name was called, you walked up and picked up a subject that you'd never seen before and started talking.
Started talking right then, yeah.
And he got a subject, and of course, he was small. Well, he is a small man. Mm-hmm. And he got this subject, and he looked at it a while. And it was some subject that was completely foreign to him. And he thought a few seconds, and finally he said, Dr. LaFollette and classmates, the situation in which I now find myself parallels to a great degree, I think, that of Zacchaeus. Zacchaeus, the biblical character who climbed a tree in order to get a better glimpse of his master. Zacchaeus was short of stature. So am I.
Mm-hmm.
Zacchaeus was up a stump. So am I. Zacchaeus came down. So shall I. And he sat down.
Yeah. Oh, boy. Oh, he's clever. Well, time just keeps sailing away. Now we've got to get you married some way, I guess.
I married a girl from Carter County, Kentucky. Up east
Olive Hill?
Olive Hill and Grayson. That's right. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, that's great country between Lexington and Ashland.
Fay Evans. Yes, that's right. Ashland's about 20 miles away, 22 or 3.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. You probably met her around Lexington.
I met her at Lexington University.
Yeah.
Sure did.
Well, now, Marvin, you attained quite a number of honors. You were attorney for was it the bank here in town?
Yes, Bank of Marshall County.
You and Loman Trevathan always...
Loman was a wonderful fellow, wasn't he?
Yeah,
Beautiful man.
He really was.
Mr. Hattler, Morgan's still there, and he's an excellent fellow.
Now, let's see. Were you a county attorney?
I was county attorney 4 terms. Kind of proud of that.
Yeah.
As far as I know.
You had to win election to that, so
Yes.
the people voted you in.
As far as I know, no one else has ever elected 4 terms as county attorney.
Mm-hmm.
It's a kind of a death trap usually. About 1 or 2 terms is all most people get.
Mm-hmm.
It's difficult to be reelected. It's not a popular office.
Okay, now what did you go on to from there?
Well, I practiced law, for a long time, private practice.
Mm-hmm.
And then when I decided to retire from private practice, I helped set up the public defender system in Kentucky.
Mm-hmm.
And
do you think that was a very much needed thing?
well, prior to the public defender system, an attorney paid his dues by
Giving free service.
Giving free service to people. I'm not sure that wasn't good. However, many times the service wasn't the best. Bill Ely, I don't know whether you remember Bill Ely, was a lawyer.
Mm-hmm.
That was Joe Ely's boy. He's a uncle of Winnie Ely, who is the secretary for Mike Ward, the present Commonwealth attorney.
Mm-hmm.
Bill Ely tells a story of a lawyer in Paducah. We won't call his name, but a fellow that he'd lost his voice and he just whispered.
Mm-hmm.
And he was an old-time lawyer there. And Bill said that one day that he had gone to the call of the criminal docket, and Holland Bryan was judge, circuit judge. Now, also, he was judge in Marshall County.
I remember.
You may
that.
remember Marshall County and
Oh, yes.
and McCracken were together.
That is true under Judge Price at first, and
That's
then
true.
later Holland Bryan.
That's true. Well, he was appointed to defend a fellow on a murder charge, and the older lawyer said, "Well, Judge, could we have just a few minutes to talk to him?" Said, "We'd like to find out what his defense is." And mind you, now were appointed and you went right into trial, usually under the old system. And so the judge says, "Yes, just use my chambers back here." So they went in, and the client went in first, Bill went in second, and the man came in behind him and closed the door. And the older lawyer said to him, says, "Son, have you got any money?" And he said, "No, I haven't." He said, "Well, has your aunt got any money?" "No." "How about your Uncle Joe?" "No, he hasn't got any either." And well, says, "Bill, you got any questions you want to ask?" And that's about the preparation that we got.
Some people put their heart in it, I suppose, and did the best job they could, and others were not too interested if they didn't get paid.
Well, I think generally they fought awfully hard, because some of the hardest fights I was ever in was when I was appointed to the case.
Mm-hmm.
But you didn't.
You tried to
couldn't
make a
do too much
reputation,
preparation.
yes.
You couldn't. Well, that was a good opportunity. Yeah.
Mhm. But as far as preparing, you just didn't have much of a chance, did you?
No.
Well, I guess the doctors, physicians used to, the medical treatment for many of the poor had to be given free, didn't it?
Yes, and I would assume that they probably, well, of course there wasn't any great preparation in any profession then, though, was there? I don't guess there was for that. At that
Oh, you
time.
didn't have 1,000 laboratory tests you
No,
could run
not like they have now.
and ask all these additional things.
You didn't have as many good drugstores either, where you get the narcotics that were
No.
needed,
Mhm.
medicines that were needed.
You know, there were an awful lot of family physicians, though. Now, my dad used to tell me he remembered 5 doctors at one time in Hardin.
I've heard that there were 5 then. I didn't remember that many. I remember 2 maybe.
I remember Irvin Hughes, my mother's cousin.
Right.
I
And
re-
Dr. Pace? No, not Dr. Pace.
Dr. Caulfield
Dr.
was there.
Caulfield,
They and Dr. Russell and Dr. Victor Stark, who later moved to Kirksey.
Yes, he moved.
I can't think who the 5th one
What
was.
is it?
Was there a Dr. Clayton?
Yes, there was a Dr. Clayton, and he would have been a grandfather of Boris Clayton.
Yeah.
He was the father of Mark Clayton and
Mhm.
Dan Clayton.
Mm-hmm.
I think I'm correct.
Yeah,
Now, he could have been their grandfather.
might have been.
I believe he was their father, however.
Well, Marvin, a lot of things have changed since you and I were in college. The railroad's gone.
Yeah, the railroad's gone. Used to be a big depot in Hardin.
Yeah.
Used to be a big depot here in Benton.
And I have, when I'd get totally out of a ride, I could always come home from Murray on the 8 o'clock train
Mhm.
at night.
Right,
And I could go to school in the morning on the 7 o'clock train.
right.
So.
Do you remember the cost of a ticket from Hardin to Murray?
Well, it cost 15 cents.
I knew it wasn't much. Yes.
And of course, as when the war came along, it went up, I believe, to a quarter.
Mm-hmm.
Prices rose a little bit.
Yeah.
That wasn't all that
You
high.
could walk it cheaper than that, couldn't you?
Yeah. Oh, me, we had such wonderful times. Did you ever have any classes under Dr. C.S. Sig Lowry?
Dr. Lowry was the best teacher I ever had.
Now, he's in the nursing
He's
home
the
right
nursing
out
home right
here.
here at Benton, yes. Dr. Lowry is just a wonderful man. I saw him in Memphis not too long ago. I was at the airport there. I'd come in from Chicago, and believe it or not, from coming from Chicago, they'll send you to Memphis to get to Paducah. And I was changing planes in Memphis, and as I left the desk, I got my reservation on the plane. I already had it, and I sat down. I heard a voice that was very familiar, talking with the lady who was taking reservations on the plane that was coming back to Paducah. And she said, "No, we don't have any reservations, Mr. Lowry," and looked up as Dr. Lowry. And of course, he had been to visit his daughter Ann in Oklahoma. I'm not sure where she is.
Oklahoma or Texas.
Somewhere like that.
His wife was from Benton.
Yes, she was a Jones.
Jones.
Sure, yes. And he, without his seeing me, I just walked up there and I told him, I said, "You don't have a reservation for him?" He said, "No." I said, "You give him my seat." Of course, as you know, he was in his 80s.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, "You give him my seat, and I'll get one later." And I sat back down, and they called him back up there, and he still hadn't seen me. They called him back up and gave him my seat, and they went on and boarded.
Mm-hmm.
And I was still sitting there. And finally, one of the stewardesses came back out and said, "Mr. Prince, yes, would you mind sitting back in the back of the plane with the stewardesses?" I said, "No, I'll be happy to." I rode with the stewardesses.
Well, are you? Do you have any children?
No, we have no children.
Well, let me ask you this before we go off. You've retired and you're enjoying life and having fun, and are you getting to travel any much now?
Yes, that's my wife and I say that everybody else likes A, B, C, and D vitamins, and we like vitamin G-O.
Yeah.
We go all the time.
Well, did you tell me a story once that you were in Mississippi and you ran on to something about Jefferson Davis?
I did. That was just recently. It was down in Biloxi, Mississippi, at Jefferson Davis's home. And in looking over the home, there's a beautiful home. They had some letters and things there, and they had one letter that I copied. It was in the handwriting of Jefferson Davis. It was dated the 12th day of January, 1870, and it read as follows: "My dear sir, with many thanks for your kindness, I must excuse myself from attending the opera tonight. The lights affect my eyes, and the night air excites a cough. Truly yours, Jefferson Davis." And then it was addressed to, at the bottom of the letter, Dr. W.S. Arrington, A-R-R-I-N-G-T-O-N.
And you said there was a woman doctor one time.
That's the reason I copied the letter, because we had a woman doctor, Allie M. Arrington, in Benton in 1940. She didn't stay long, but she was here, and she had an office in what used to be the corner drugstore on the Court Square. Mm-hmm. And at that time, Doc Halliday was running the drugstore. He was a pharmacist. They called him Doc. It wasn't unusual to call a pharmacist Doc then.
No.
And she drove a Packard automobile and wore boots. One of the first women I ever saw wearing boots, and she wore boots that came up to the calf of her leg. Mm-hmm. And she was from Mississippi. Mm-hmm. And I wondered what akin she was, if any, to the Dr. Arrington in Mississippi here, because Arrington is not a common name.
No.
Now,
really.
Arrington is.
Yeah.
Or Harrington is.
Uh-huh.
But Arrington is unusual.
It really is.
Well, I inquired around, and they said that there was an opera in Biloxi, but there was a doctor by the name of Arrington who practiced at Brookhaven, Mississippi, which would be about 95 miles north of Biloxi.
Yeah.
And it was thought probably that he might have been the doctor who had come south to go to the opera at Biloxi and had invited Jefferson Davis to go to the opera with him.
Quite an interesting story. I don't know if we got more than a minute left, but of all the things that you've said. The thing that's impressed me, I think, is what Walter Prince did, and I believe I remember that he was a Republican and elected in Marshall County. He must have been some kind of a great man.
He was the first Republican ever to carry Marshall County, and he carried it as county judge and served a term, I believe, from 1917 to 1921 as county judge of Marshall County.
They thought a lot of him, didn't
They did. He was a good man. He was an excellent man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Marvin Prince, I thank you for coming.